Long ago, there was a man named Honorable Maduka Orji. The title Honorable attached to his name was not one of political standing, but rather one earned through virtue. Honorable Maduka was a man of reputable character, known for his unwavering commitment to truth, a man who could never be swayed by money. He was a philanthropist, extending his generous hand to his community at every opportunity. These virtues, among others, earned him the respected title of Honorable Maduka. He was a blessed man, prosperous in his business, and a devoted father to a handsome young son. Honorable Maduka had journeyed through life, experiencing both good days and challenging ones. His home, however, was marked by an absence of motherly care, for he had lost his beloved wife to a relentless illness. She was the love of his youth, his soulmate, and her loss left a void that no one else could fill. Choosing to honor her memory, Honorable Maduka never remarried. Instead, he dedicated his life to raising their son, ensuring he grew up with the values that mattered most: integrity, kindness, and respect. Years passed, and his son, Chikezie, grew into a man. No longer under his father's direct care, he had ventured out to follow the path life had set before him. Chikezie became not only the pride of his father, but also the strength that sustained him. A PhD holder and a respected engineer recognized both at home and abroad, Kingsley had made a name for himself, becoming the pride of the entire Odudu community. As Chikezie achieved new heights, he continued to carry with him the values his father had instilled. Honorable Maduka watched with pride as his son flourished, grateful that Chikezie had grown into a man of integrity, a worthy reflection of the legacy he had hoped to pass on. Despite the close bond between Honorable Maduka and his son, Chikezie, an issue had quietly lingered like a shadow between them: the issue of marriage. It wasn't supposed to be complicated, especially since Chikezie had found someone he truly wanted to spend his life with. During a Christmas holiday back home, after returning from overseas, he had introduced his beloved Eunice to his father, hoping to share his joy. But Honorable Maduka had sternly objected. "She is not the right wife for you," he said, his voice unexpectedly firm. "But, Papa," Chikezie pleaded, "we've known each other for a long time. She's everything I want, educated and well-mannered. Why can't you accept her?" His father's response was gentle yet resolute. "My son, I respect your feelings, but there are things an elder can see that youth may overlook. Marriage is not child's play. Once you enter, things become serious, and the person you're married to reveals their true self. A mistaken marriage could halt your entire life. I worry her character isn't what you believe it to be." "But she does love me," Chikezie insisted softly, a hopeful smile on his face. Yet his father remained unmoved. "Take your time, my son," Honor Maduka advised, signaling the end of the conversation. "Do not rush into a decision you may later regret." In their home, Chikezie was a grown man, yet he was still viewed as his father's child. In the culture of Odudu, marriage decisions held significant weight within the family. A son did not simply bring home a wife for himself; she would bear the family's name and legacy. Without his father's blessing, Chikezie would have to suspend his plans, fearing that a union without approval could invite misfortune. Unable to change his father's mind, Chikezie left the country again, after making it clear that he loved Eunice deeply and intended to marry her, come what may. Yet a year passed, and he had not returned to settle the matter, for his father's decision remained unyielding. Despite their disagreement, their bond held strong. On their frequent phone calls, Chikezie would laugh and say, "I'll wait, Papa." He downplayed the issue with humor and patience, hoping that someday his father would see Eunice as he did. But that day never came. Honorable Maduka stood firm, rooted in his beliefs. As the months slipped by, Chikezie faced a painful choice to honor his father's wishes or follow his heart. It was a test of love and loyalty, leaving Chikezie torn between the legacy of family and the promise of a future with Eunice. Honorable Maduka Orji hailed from the enigmatic community of Odudu, a place revered for its wealth, mystery, and ancient traditions. The people of Odudu had a reputation that transcended mere success. They were known for greatness that seemed to pass effortlessly from generation to generation, woven into the fabric of their culture. Odudu's prosperity was built on large-scale farming and livestock rearing. Vast herds and abundant fields brought fortune to the community. Yet, beneath the surface, there lingered something deeper, something darker. The people of Odudu practiced rites that outsiders would call sorcery, worshipping the gods of their forefathers with a fierce devotion. This devotion to the old ways, the path of idols and powerful rituals, had kept Odudu connected to forces beyond ordinary comprehension. Stories whispered through the generations told of men and women who could alter their very form, of those with the ability to transform into lions, a power both feared and revered. Some dismissed these stories as myth, but one family kept the legends alive, the Orji family. This lineage was no stranger to power or mystery for Honorable. Maduka's own grandfather, Chief Osisi Orji, had once wielded this lion's power. Known as the traditional ruler of Odudu and the oldest man ever to live in the community, Chief Osisi's story was both legend and nightmare. Chief Osisi was a formidable man, feared and respected by all who knew him. In his time, he had ruled Odudu with an iron fist, wielding power that seemed almost supernatural. It was said he could transform into a lion at will, a gift or curse that he used to strike terror into the hearts of his enemies. His compound was shrouded in fear, his family name spoken with both reverence and dread. As he grew wealthier and his herds expanded, a sudden and tragic misfortune struck. One morning, Chief Osisi awoke to find his livestock slaughtered, their remains scattered across his fields in a gruesome display. The community quaked with fear upon learning the culprit, a lion. Rumors spread like wildfire, and the terror was palpable. Night after night, the beast returned, tearing through Chief Osisi's animals with unrelenting ferocity, leaving behind a blood-soaked trail. For Chief Osisi, it was more than just a loss of wealth. It was a personal affront, a challenge to his authority. Yet despite his power, he could do nothing to stop the attacks. The relentless lion seemed determined to strip him of his fortune, and his attempts to protect his livestock failed time and again. In desperation, Chief Osisi turned to the path he knew best, the path of the mystical. Leaving his village, he journeyed to a distant land to seek the aid of a powerful dibia, a medicine man. The dibia was known to possess knowledge of the otherworldly, the kind of wisdom that could pierce through the veil of the natural world and confront the supernatural. When Chief Osisi finally arrived, the dibia's revelation stunned him. The lion is no ordinary beast, the dibia intoned. It is an enemy in disguise, a man like you who has taken on the lion's form to ruin you. Chief Osisi's heart pounded with fear and rage. Who could wield such a power? He asked, almost in disbelief. Give me a name, dibia, he snarled with rage. Power such as this is not beyond reach, the dibia replied, his eyes narrowing. If you wish to fight him, you must become like him. You too must possess the power to transform. The choice weighed heavily on Chief Osisi, but desperation left him little room to question. He agreed, and the dibia began the ritual, warning him of its price. Once you step into this realm, Chief Osisi, your family will be marked for life. Any male descendant born on the night of the Agu ritual will inherit this power. Chief Osisi's resolve hardened. So be it. The initiation granted him the power he sought, Returning to his village, he soon discovered the enemy and did not hesitate to unleash his newfound power upon him. Yet the thrill of transformation consumed him, and the boundaries between protector and tyrant blurred. The chief, once regarded as Odudu's guardian, became its terror, using his power not just for protection but for dominance. Under his reign, the community lived in fear, dreading the roar that signaled his approach. When Chief Osisi finally passed, the tales of the Lion Man faded, yet the people of Odudu never forgot the shadow he left behind. The power he unleashed was a warning, a reminder of the delicate line between strength and tyranny, and the heavy price of invoking forces beyond one's control. And though the lion no longer prowled, whispers of the orgy legacy persisted, a haunting reminder of a curse bound to blood and lineage. Years passed, and life seemed to return to normal. Honorable Maduka Orji, unlike his forefathers, distanced himself from idol worship and sorcery. The tales of his grandfather had haunted him as a young lad, leaving him with unanswered questions. Was the legend of the Lion Man true? Could a human truly alter their form? He was grateful he had never lived to witness it. As far as he was concerned, the story belonged in the past, a relic buried with his grandfather, Chief Osisi Orji. Honorable Orji's father, too, had rejected the legacy, shuddering at the mention of the Lion Man's tales. That reaction had always stayed with Honor Orji, cementing his resolve to leave such beliefs buried. Up until now, no one in the family had ever manifested the dreaded power, and that was his consolation. But as life often reminds us, some fears cannot be so easily laid to rest. One day, a dark cloud settled upon Honor Orji's home, a day he had prayed would never come. It was the day the Dibia, the chief priest of the entire Odudu land, paid him an unexpected visit. That evening, Honorable Orji had just returned from a village meeting and was enjoying his usual routine. Seated comfortably in his compound, he sipped from a freshly tapped keg of palm wine. The air was serene, the evening breeze caressing his skin. His maid had served him a hearty meal, and his small radio hummed a soft tune, providing a perfect backdrop for his thoughts. His mind wandered to his son, Chikezie, and the ongoing dispute about his marriage. Things hadn't turned out the way he'd hoped. His son had stood his ground, insisting that it was either Eunice or no one else. Their impasse had stretched over a year. Though they spoke often, Chikezie had not returned home, declaring he would only come back for his marriage rites. While Honorable Orji admired his son's determination, he remained steadfast in his refusal, and their patience was running thin. As he brooded over these thoughts, a commanding voice shattered the peaceful evening. Greetings, Wenze Osisi Orji, the voice boomed, addressing him as the grandson of the late Chief Osisi Orji. Startled, Hondro Orji looked up. There, at the entrance of his compound, stood the Dibia, the chief priest himself, a man whose presence alone carried the weight of the gods. Honorable Orji rose swiftly, out of respect and fear. Greetings, Dibia, he said calmly, masking his unease. Greetings, son of the Great One, the priest replied, his tone formal, but his expression unreadable. I'm having some wine. Why don't you join me? Honorable Orji offered, gesturing toward a seat. I came unannounced, the Dibia responded. Perhaps another time. My errand forbids such pleasures. I see, Honor Orji replied, unease tightening his chest. He adjusted his seat, sensing that this visit carried grave news. The Night of the Lions, the Dibia began. What about it? Honorable Orji asked, his voice shaky. A chill ran down his spine. For years we believed the power of your grandfather had died with him, the Dibia said solemnly. Did something happen? Honorable Orji interrupted, his fear mounting. Why are you here, Dibia? You know my stance. I do not believe in superstitions. I'm sorry, Great One, the Dibia said, his eyes gleaming with an eerie red glow. His lips curled into a sinister smile. Your grandfather may have died, but his power has not. Last night I received a signal of his presence. God forbid! Not in my time, Honorable Orgy exclaimed, his voice rising. I'm a Christian. My father rejected this, and so do I. Why now? I cannot answer all questions, the Debia replied cryptically. I came to warn you. Warn me? How? Honorable Orgy demanded, his heart racing. Your son was born on the night of the lions, the priest said, his voice grave. What? What does that mean? Honorable Orgy asked, his fear evident. Whoever is born on that night and whose feet touch this community a year from now will inherit the power forever, the Dibia explained. I came to warn you. Ensure your son does not return within the year. What? Honorable Orgy's voice rose in alarm. His eyes widened, disbelief etched on his face. But the Dibia offered no further explanation. With the same sinister smile, he abruptly turned and left the compound, disappearing into the night. Honorable Orgy sat frozen, the weight of the warning pressing heavily on him. As soon as the Dibia was gone, Honor Orgy wasted no time. His hands trembled as he dialed his son's number. When Chikezie picked up, Honor Orgy's voice was trembling with urgency. He yelled, imploring his son to heed the warning, but Chikezie brushed it off, calling it one of those cock and bull stories. To him it was nothing more than a stale, outdated tale meant to scare children. The call ended abruptly with Honorable Orgy cutting the line in frustration. The next day, however, Chikezie, being an obedient son, called back to apologize. He agreed to respect his father's wishes, and the issue of coming home that year was quietly set aside. But for Honorable Orgy, the shadow of the warning lingered, and his heart carried the weight of a legacy he had long tried to forget. A month had passed, and Honorable Orgy had begun to relax after the Dibia's visit and the intense struggle to convince his son to abide by the agreement to stay away from the village for a year. He thought the matter was behind him until one fateful day. Honorable Orgy was at the town hall, addressing a meeting as usual, when his phone rang, interrupting his speech. It was a call he could not ignore. Apologizing to those gathered, he stepped outside to answer. It was his son, Chikezie, on the line. Good evening, Papa, his son's familiar voice rang out. My son, I'm glad to hear your voice. How have you been? Honorable Orgy asked, smiling, his heart filled with joy and fulfillment. I'm fine, Papa, Chikezie replied warmly before adding, Guess what, Father? What's the surprise, my son? Honorable Orgy asked, intrigued. I'm home, Father, Chikezie blurted out, laughing. The laughter on the line seemed to echo into a silence that grew heavy. Chikezie called again. Papa, Papa, what did you just say, son? Honorable Orgy asked at last, his voice low, sadness creeping in. I said I'm coming home, Father, Chikezie repeated, excitement in his tone. Against our agreement? Honorable Orgy questioned, his nerves straining. Please, my son, go back to where you're coming from, he pleaded. Why, Father? Chikezie asked, puzzled by his father's tone. Do not argue with me, Honor Orgy said, his voice breaking. Go back and do not come home until I summon you. But why? I'm coming to settle the issue of my marriage once and for all. Time is passing, Papa, Chikezie said, a note of frustration in his voice. I know, my son, but not now. This is not the time for that, Honor Orgy replied, his voice trembling. I am speaking as your father. Do not let your feet touch the soil of Odudu. I'm getting married to Eunice, Papa, Chikezie countered firmly. You have never chosen a time to disobey me, and now you're coming home against my wishes. This is an odd time, Chikezie, Honorable Orgy yelled. Go back if you value your life. These are just superstitions, Papa. You've never believed in them before, Chikezie replied. These things are real, my son, Honorable Orgy retorted. I will willingly marry you both once the night of the lion ceremony has passed. You mean you've agreed for me to marry Eunice? Chikezie asked, surprised. Of course, son, you have my consent, Honorable, Orji said, desperation in his voice. I'm sorry, Papa, but I'm already near the village, Chikezie said apologetically. Turn back. Do not return home. Honorable Orji pleaded, sorrow consuming him. Do you want to kill me at my old age? Before he could say more, the line went dead, the network cutting off. Frustration gripped Honorable Orji as he hurriedly left the meeting, leaving the townsfolk bewildered. When he arrived home, his fears materialized. He stood frozen as his son's vehicle pulled into the compound, his heart pounding with anger and dread. Chikezie stepped out of the car, a smile on his face, but his father's disappointment was palpable. You have made a grave mistake, Honyor Orji snarled, his voice trembling. What could be the worst, Papa? I'm surprised you're beginning to sound like them, Chikezie said, bewildered. Your great-grandfather was a lion man, Honor Orji blurted out, unable to contain his frustration. This is no superstition. It was an oath taken by him. Why would you choose to ruin your life? Are you saying I, Chikezie, will automatically turn into a lion? Chikezie asked, incredulity on his face. May God save you, my son, Honora Orji said sadly, tears filling his eyes. Rising abruptly, he retreated into his room, leaving his son behind. A week after Chikezie's return, the dreaded Night of the Lion ceremony took place. Honorable Orji, refusing to partake, stayed away, but the air was thick with unease. A day later, while planting flowers in his backyard, Honora Orji heard a chilling, fearsome sound coming from inside his house. It sounded like the eruption of an earthquake, a roar so dreadful it shook the very core of Honora Orji's being. It was a sound unlike anything he had ever heard in his life, powerful, primal, and terrifying. The entire compound seemed to tremble as if struck by a tornado, its ferocity leaving destruction in its wake. My son! He cried, running toward the source of the noise. The roar grew louder and more horrifying, filling the air with dread. Help me, God, he prayed, rushing into the house only to freeze in shock. Before his eyes, he saw his son's image contorting painfully, his body shifting into a monstrous lion. Chimo! He exclaimed, his voice breaking as he collapsed in terror. When he finally regained consciousness, his maid and some kinsmen were gathered around him, their faces filled with concern. My son, he murmured weakly, where is he? The village is in trouble, an elderly man replied, his tone grim. A lion is loose, causing havoc. We cannot let you go outside. But my son, I need to find him. He will be all right. Hondro Orji, the man replied, his voice trembling. The kinsman, unaware of the truth, reassured him. Everyone has taken shelter. The lion must have wandered from the forest. God has saved you, Honorable. They asked if he had been attacked, their eyes scanning the house, which looked as if a storm had ripped through it. But Honorable Orji remained silent, his heart shattered by the truth. From that day forward, Chikezie became the Lion Man, cursed to transform whenever the power came upon him. He roamed the forests at night, a figure of terror and mystery to the village. The people whispered of the strange lion that haunted their land, but never suspected the horrifying truth behind its existence, except for the Dibia. Though unaware of Chikezie's sudden return, his powers granted him insight into the lion's true identity. With a heavy heart, the Dibia sighed in sorrow as the wild tales of the lion's rampage spread through the village. For Honorable Orji, the burden was unbearable. He watched helplessly as his once vibrant son withered under the weight of the curse, his life consumed by the transformation. It was a cruel legacy, a dark inheritance Honora Orji had spent his entire life trying to escape, now unfolding before his eyes with devastating clarity. From the night of his manifestation, Chikezie's life had become unbearable, the weight of his curse crushing him with each passing day. He could no longer bear the torment, and finally called his father, his voice breaking as he sobbed. If you love your son, if you still have an iota of love for me, Papa, he pleaded, kill me. Honorable Orgy shuddered at his son's words, recoiling as though struck. What? May God forbid that I would kill my own son, he cried out in pain. But I'm no longer your son, Papa, Chikezie replied desperately. I'm a cursed one, a lion man. May God forbid, Hondra Orgy groaned, tears welling in his eyes. How can you ask me to commit such an abominable act? You are still my son, Chikezie, no matter what. I'm miserable, Papa, Chikezie sobbed. How long will we hide this? Very soon the villagers will discover that the supposed lion terrorizing them is your beloved son. Until then, my son, his father replied gently, though his voice was trembling. But let's forget this moment, please. He rose, sorrowful, and walked away, leaving Chikezie to grieve alone. Chikezie, however, continued pleading, each request chipping away at his father's resolve. The villagers had begun to whisper about his sudden return and the strange illness that had befallen him. Still, no one suspected the truth, for the dibia had sealed his lips, bound by the promise he made to Honard Orgy on the day of his visit. When Eunice, Chikezie's fiancée, heard that he had been back in the village for some time, but had neither visited nor called, her heart was filled with sadness and confusion. Why had he returned without telling her? Why was he avoiding her? Troubled, she decided to confront him. The very next day, Eunice arrived at Hondra Orgy's compound and asked for Chikezie. When the maid announced her arrival, Chikezie nearly screamed, I don't want to see anyone. But it was too late. Eunice was already standing in front of him. Her face fell as she took in his appearance, his overgrown hair, his unkempt clothes, and the haunted look in his eyes. Her anger melted into concern. My love, she said softly, her voice trembling, why are you like this? Chikezie stood frozen, his heart tearing apart at the sight of her. Why did you come? He asked harshly, his tone cutting. You returned and never told me, she replied, her voice breaking. Why? My love, why are you like this? This isn't you. What happened to you? Chikezie turned away, his face hardening. Please, Eunice, keep away from me. Why? She asked, her tears falling freely now. What is going on? Tell me, my love, are you sick? Did you lose your business? None of that, Chikezie muttered, his voice filled with anguish. Then why are you like this? What's happening here? She pressed. I'm no good for you, Eunice, he managed to say, his voice trembling. But you're my love, she cried. Our love is over, he blurted out, his voice rising. Do you understand? It's finished. If you value your life, leave, because the next second is not guaranteed, he blurted, his laughter breaking into a hysterical, maniacal sound that sent chills down her spine. Eunice stared at him in shock, her hands trembling. You're beginning to sound strange, my love, she whispered. Has your father succeeded in separating us? Has he sacrificed his son's happiness for his pride? Just leave, Eunice, Chikezie shouted, his voice breaking, his anguish visible, although he tried very hard to sound convincing. All right, I'll leave, she said, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. But I'll be back. I won't stand by and let your father ruin our lives. She turned and hurried away, tears streaming down her face. As Eunice disappeared from sight, Chikezie let out a loud guttural cry and ran into his room, locking himself away. Each passing day broke him a little more. He pleaded with his father after every transformation, begging for a way to end his misery, but nothing worked. Every measure they tried failed, and he became more of a recluse, a shadow of his former self, a roaming lunatic consumed by despair. Then one fateful day, as father and son sat together for lunch, the dreaded transformation began again. Chikezie snarled mid-meal, and before Hondra Orgy could react, the beast within his son took over. Chikezie roared, his body contorting into the monstrous lion. This time, however, he was not himself. He became aggressive, thrashing violently and destroying everything in sight. For the first time, Chikezie turned his rage toward his father. As the lion crouched, ready to pounce, Honra Orji grabbed his double-barrel gun. With tears streaming down his face, he hesitated but had no choice. The lion lunged, and he fired. The roar that followed echoed across the village, sending people running toward the compound. Among them was Eunice, who arrived just as honorable. Orji, still clutching the gun, stared in disbelief. The monstrous lion, now mortally wounded, began to shift. Before his eyes, it transformed back into Chikezie, lying motionless in a pool of his own blood, before any outsider will witness the transformation. Rest, my son, Honora Orji whispered, collapsing beside him in tears. Eunice let out a scream so piercing it drew the entire village to the scene. The sight was horrifying, the elderly man on his knees, his son lifeless before him, and the gun still in his trembling hands. "You monster!" Eunice screamed. "You killed your son!" Her words echoed as the villagers, confused and mourning, dragged Hon Orji to the village square for an explanation. But Honorable Orji remained silent. "I killed him," he muttered over and over, determined to carry his son's secret to the grave. He refused to let the world know that the lion terrorizing Odudu had been his son. Eunice, in her grief and anger, testified against him, blaming him for separating them and ruining their lives. Despite her harsh words, honorable. Orji found solace in knowing someone had loved his son, even in his darkest moments. Banished from Odudu in disgrace, Honorable Orji left the only home he had ever known. As he walked away, he carried with him the weight of his loss, the pain of his actions, and the memory of his son, a cursed man who had become a tragic legend in the land of Odudu. The end. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please share in the comments what you learned. To support my channel, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Click the notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Stay tuned for more captivating stories. See you next time.